Starting out, I know that last week, we talked about whether we would want to have a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group. I don't know if anybody has reached a consensus on that, but we're thinking we're going to be making a Facebook group just so that everybody can stay connected with one another as the program goes on and then after the program. And then Caroline, if you want to talk about World Toilet Day.
Yeah, so we want to give you guys more opportunities to network and get to know each other. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a Slack channel where you guys can communicate and keep in touch. And if you don't know what Slack is, it's very similar to Discord and it's very easy to set up. So we'll send you guys instructions on how to do all of that. And then we also want to give you guys opportunities to brainstorm solutions and apply and kind of tie together everything that you guys have learned. So World Toilet Day is coming up on November 19th. And we think it would be a great idea if you guys could brainstorm some ways that we could take action, all of us like as a group. And this is going to be a fun project for all of us to work on together. And we can even schedule an extra but optional meeting for you guys to get together and brainstorm different project ideas without the pressure of like guest speakers and needing to listen to a presentation and absorb that information. So if this sounds like something that you guys are interested in, please express interest by email or putting something in the chat or like direct messaging us, just so that we can kind of figure out how many people want to be involved in this and if we're kind of going in the right direction with all of this. And if you guys have any other ideas related to networking opportunities and other involvement, please let us know. We really appreciate you guys' feedback.
Can I just add regarding World Toilet Day? So when we started Water Emissaries, it started because of 5 interns that were working for us a summer ago wanted to continue their work with us, but we didn't have their internship ended. And so the way that we looked at creating this was through the Water Emissaries, which you're now the first group coming through our program. And World Toilet Day is November 19th of this year. And when we looked at this, not a lot of people know about World Toilet Day, and yet there's 2.5 billion people on the planet that don't have access to water and sanitation hygiene, and it's something that's solvable. So that's really was the impetus, one of them for us starting for what's called WASH, W-A-S-H, Water and Sanitation Hygiene. And it came up with the name of We Give a Crap, where we water emissaries give a crap about people, about the planet, about sanitation and hygiene. And so we did some fun things with TikTok, we did Instagram, did some recordings, and we have other ideas to share with you, but we'd love to put it to you all for you to come back with some ideas that would be fun and kitschy and engaging and educating people about the importance of sanitation hygiene throughout the globe, which of course COVID is directly related to that, with water being the passing agent. So I'll leave it with that, and we'll talk more about that later. Back to you, Caroline or Madeline.
Yeah, it's a great way to sort of apply everything that we've learned and been working on. And then third announcement is just in terms of recordings and resources on the website. If you scroll down to the bottom of the Water Emissaries website, there's a link that says current emissaries. And then if you click that, you have access to all of the recordings of the sessions that we've had so far, which aren't available on YouTube. They're only available through that link for emissaries, just so that you guys are getting access to the program. And if you have any other ideas, again, about things that we can include on that part of the website, let us know. And then finally, regarding a newsletter, again, this is sort of just an overall brainstorm. We're going to be doing a newsletter to keep everybody in touch after we finish up the pilot and as we go into future programs. So again, just sort of thinking about what you'd like to see in a newsletter or how frequently you'd like to see things in a newsletter. And we're going to send out an email with this information as well, so you can respond to that. And we can now get into our guest speakers. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, I know Andy, you have to leave a bit early. If you'd like to go first and share your background and story, and then we can follow up with Nigel and Peter as well.
Awesome. I don't know how I'll start, and tell me if ask questions or stop me if more in depth, less in depth. But most of my career was in retail at Walmart, actually. And so came to Walmart, probably the last place that I thought I would end up. I thought I would never do business. And through a number of twists and turns, ended up running global strategy at Walmart, which we can talk about. But last thing that I expected, I really enjoyed it and the kind of playing field. And in my first 3 years at Walmart, one of the things that was on the agenda was sustainability. Right place, right time, and got to start sustainability at Walmart. And was just a fortunate moment to get to be at that company and to get to work on that. Opened my eyes to so many things, some of which we're talking about here, but really things that I couldn't believe I was unaware of before before some of the things that I was learning. And one of one of the places that if you're Walmart, you realize no matter how many times you move things from point A to point B, no matter what your trucks or stores are like, it is all about the products you sell. So after 3 years in sustainability, I became pretty fixated on products, and I moved to overseeing Walmart's private brands, Walmart's own products. And I went to do that with the eye toward, if I write the check of buying these, $20+ billion of products each year, we can just change how these are made. So why would we ever have agriculture that's not drip ag, right? And just basic practices. And what I found was that even with better practices, sometimes it was 3 steps forward, sometimes 2 back, but sometimes 4 back. One of the examples that I clearly remember is removing the plastic in a piece of plastic cutlery. If you see like at a picnic or something, if you see plastic forks. I was so excited that after 100 years of plastic forks, knives, and spoons, we removed 13% of the resin. So 13% of the resin that never needs to be put into a fork. But then we'd sell twice as many. And that was just a great example of kind of 3 steps forward, sometimes 4 back. And I started becoming obsessed about at the time called the sharing economy. So I moved out to the West Coast with Walmart, Walmart Labs, Walmart.com, but really very quickly after moving out here, left to start what's now Trove, originally YERRI. And that's Stu when we got connected originally, which was the idea that there's no amount of math in the world that's going to make what's now roughly 15 billion items we produce each year for 7 billion humans, 15 billion items each year for 7 billion humans. There's no amount of less bad you can make those items where the math is going to work. We have got, one of the things we need to do is we need to be able to get more value, more use out of the things that we've made. And we're here for very good reason. We've been basically on a 70-year journey to get more value, lower cost, out of economies of scale of production and distribution. And this next 50+ years is going to be about asset utilization, getting more use out of the items you've already made. So started originally as peer-to-peer. We looked very much like an eBay with a blockchain or a Facebook marketplace. And about 5 years ago, we realized that, we had millions of members, but the way in here was going to be brands. And that brands had the real ability to unlock all of this. So about 5 years ago, we pivoted our business to support only brands. We started with Patagonia. And so today as Trove, we are the leading provider that powers some of the best brands in the world: Patagonia, Lululemon, REI, Levi's, Arc'teryx, Eileen Fisher. It's about 85% of any brand out there that is buying back their items online in stores and reselling their items next to new. And we are the back end. Trove is the back end that powers that. We do all the operations and the technology that allows that to work. And as brands do that, they actually build substantial margin and build a really incredible offering to taking a Patagonia, not just selling it once, but selling it 3 to 4 times. And the excitement we have in the future here is that all the water and everything that was invested in the original material that went into making a jacket can now get used, not 20% of its useful life, but 80, 90, maybe even reach kind of a full potential life cycle. And that as they do that, a single Patagonia jacket is going to displace 4 to 5 Gap jackets, because 4 to 5 people are going to buy a kid's jacket that's used instead of a Gap jacket or a Costco jacket. And so by having fewer better things, we're actually going to address what I mentioned with the plastic fork. So that's what I do today. The company's grown quite a bit. We've got about 150 brands that have approached us even this year about doing something like this. I feel like we are finally at the right place at the right time, and it's phenomenally exciting place to be.
And I want to add that to Andy's credit, as he said, starting with Walmart was the last place he expected to be. And that the journey that he has had as a founder entrepreneur, as an investor and a friend of his, I can tell you, it's the hero's journey, and successes and failures and challenges. And the key attribute that Andy has is his commitment. He's been committed from day one. He has been unbelievably passionate, and his level of integrity is extraordinary. And so for each of you as entrepreneurs and fellow founders, I know these are attributes that you admonish as well. And I've just experienced it with Andy, and my acknowledgement to him for sticking with it and pivoting, being able to pivot when he needed to pivot. He's done that. And that is the key to success for an entrepreneur. So I'll leave it at that. And how about if we go to Peter next, for you, Peter, to.
Sure, but I want to ask Andy questions, but I guess I have to introduce myself first.
No. Well, that's part of the reason we have you here, is because we do want you to ask Andy questions and engage with them. But if you can hold your questions for, because if we get into it, that'll get into it too far. So let's have you and then Wylie speak. And then
Okay. So I'll be brief. So Stuart, everybody, great to meet you. And just so you know, I'm now I'm part of your network. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, et cetera. So my name is Peter Fiske. I'm a scientist by training. And, I guess, Stuart, one of the things I would say is, and maybe Andy, you feel the same way, you listen to people's bios, and in hindsight, it sounds like so put together, like, wow, he did this, he did that, and all this stuff. And most of the time when you're going forward in your career, you are totally on one ski, man. Mm-hmm. And so I guess one of the things for you, for the cohort here is, like, don't worry about being uncertain about the next step. It's totally cool. And things tend to work out. And if you have an open-hearted curiosity and a genuine love for learning and for meeting people, it's surprising how many doors that opens by itself. So my little bit about me. So I trained as a scientist, a geologist originally. And I've had a somewhat circuitous career that has involved time at some of our national labs in the Department of Energy, as well as time in the White House and the Pentagon. I'm founded 2 companies, Wrapped Industries, which is an optics manufacturing technology company, and then another company, Pax Water Technologies, which is how Stuart first got to know me. And you might be interested that Pax was founded on the belief that nature, 4.5 billion years of evolution, has provided us with incredible template of designs. And so Pax had the insight to look at natural systems in a process called biomimicry to understand how do natural systems become so optimized. And then can we take some of those tricks and put them into the man-made and the built infrastructure? And at Pax, we specifically focused on water treatment and water systems for municipalities. And so that company took biomimetic principles, put them into products, and sold it into the, water treatment. So these are like, real bubbas. This is not like, Whole Foods. Like, this is real, like, workplace America. And I think that a lot of these people who had never encountered biomimicry nevertheless found it an intensely captivating concept. These men and women who work in our municipal water systems. And so after taking Pax forward to an acquisition, I then had the opportunity to come back to the research world. So today I am at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in the Berkeley Hills. That's the lab right above UC Berkeley. And I am running a national program called NAUI, the National Alliance for Water Innovation. It's a 5-year, $110 million research investment in desalination and water reuse. So Stuart, you and I are both investors. I am taking taxpayer dollars, your dollars, and trying to find the best science to advance the field of desalination and water reuse to enable us to stop using as much fresh water and to try to reuse water over and over again. So Andy, similar to you, I'm in the reuse business as well. I want to take water and reuse it over and over again rather than constantly taking these virgin water sources and exploiting them once and then getting them dirty and throwing them away.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, and Peter's also focused on desalination. So when we look at water, with 97% of our water on this planet being salt water, desal is a fundamental solution that is critical. And Peter has created this lab to help source and then support the most innovative ideas all over the globe for desal. So hats off to you. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And Nigel, so happy to have you join us. It's been a while since we've connected, and I feel you bring a whole new perspective of being more of a younger entrepreneur, and that will be a bit more attuned to the world that we're living in today. So take it away.
Yeah, awesome. Hi, I'm Nigel. I started my career as a wastewater engineer.
Can you speak up a little bit, Nigel? We're having trouble hearing you.
Stop it. Are you serious, Nigel?
Wastewater engineer.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
That's awesome. Where were you a wastewater engineer?
In Singapore.
No. Oh, well, okay. Continue with your story.
Can you guys hear him okay?
Yeah, I hear him fine.
Okay, good.
So I'm from the East Coast in the US, and I spent some of my childhood abroad in Southeast Asia. And I realized that everything I thought about the US and their water infrastructure being amazing, swimmable, fishable rivers, and all these amazing parks was totally thrown on its head when I went to high school in a place called Singapore. And Singapore is one of those few places in the world that is very wealthy and is run by a bunch of people who believe in technology and engineering to improve the quality of life. And it's a city state, which means that its government is very easy to manage and mobilize to its particular objectives. And one of these objectives was, we want to reuse and recycle and be water autonomous, which means we want water forever. And it rains a lot there. It's very tropical. So they are able to do this with a mixture of different technologies, and reusing their wastewater was one of those technologies. So I decided to focus my specialization when I went to engineering school into that of wastewater. And so I started a business there in wastewater, and quickly realized that most of Southeast Asia, besides Singapore, doesn't care about, or not that they don't care about environment, but they're very far away from being incentivized and or reprimanded for not polluting the environment. And so I said, there are all these technologies in Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, US, Canada, that can solve all these water problems and issues in Asia and Southeast Asia. So, but they don't meet the price point of what's happening in the field. So then I started a company that manufactures and licenses different technologies and imports them and installs them within Southeast Asia. And then I realized, even though Southeast Asia and Asia had the technologies, they wouldn't turn the technologies on, because turning those technologies on costs money. It's maintenance, it's hiring people. And so I realized, without this intimate connection with nature and the why protect our waters, there's no impetus to make better technologies and create new businesses, and that capitalism wouldn't be enough. Something had to work in line with capitalism. And so I found myself back in the US again, and I own and operate a company that revitalizes some of the largest wastewater treatment plants in the US, municipal and industrial. Everything from the largest hog slaughter houses in Georgia to the largest egg cracking and sugar refinery facilities in Iowa. For instance, one egg cracking facility produces 1 million and washes 1 million eggs per day, for instance. That's like one of 24 of this particular companies. And it's really nasty shit. And people pay money to get rid of their nasty stuff. And so I decided to make that my niche and my business. And yes, that's me. Thank you, Stuart, for inviting me here.
Thank you, Nigel. Appreciate that. So Peter, before we jump into questions, you had some questions you wanted to ask Andy, or if Andy, Nigel, any of you guys have some questions for each other, I'd love for you guys to have some dialogue before we jump in with the emissaries.
Yeah, well, one of the things I think maybe a theme that we've all talked about is reusing and making things, making assets more valuable by making them more durable and using the latest technology for them. And I just want to point out to everybody is that, we're poised, to potentially in this country make a huge multi-billion-dollar investment in infrastructure. And, one of my concerns is that, we're talking about spending, $550 billion on infrastructure, but there's something like $2.5 trillion of unmet need in our infrastructure. And the only way you're going to bridge that gap is by making this infrastructure, making the stuff we build back more durable, more cross-purposed, more useful, and have higher value. So I want to kind of say that's a theme. I think that you see it in all our work.
Mm-hmm. Andy, Nigel, anything else you want to add, or any comments, questions, things you want to share with each other?
Maybe we should get into the panel.
Okay. Madeline, I'll let you take it from here.
Sure. Emissaries, as usual, if you have questions, you can turn your camera on and ask, or send them to myself or Caroline in the chat, and we can ask them on your behalf as well, whatever you're comfortable with. But yeah, if people have questions. Yes, Julieta.
Hi, this is awesome. I have a few questions. I'm really curious. I'm in the animal studies master's at NYU, and I'm super curious about the amount of water used for livestock. And I'm wondering, Nigel, if you have any inclination to think about your business in terms of the future of food, perhaps cellular agriculture solutions, or kind of, you mentioned like people need to have a relationship to nature in order to know why to protect it. I'm curious, like when you're using the word nature, who falls under that? Do animals fall under that, or is it just ecosystems? And I feel in these sessions, I always have like a million questions. So I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say them all because this is too great of an opportunity. But my thesis is on the fish of the Hudson River, and the New York government has just decided to go ahead with Canadian hydropower, which could have very devastating effects for the ecosystem. And I'm curious if anybody on the panel today is thinking about how to better use the water used in hydropower. Does it go far enough? Does it give us enough benefit for the environmental consequences that it can also produce? So those are all my questions.
Let's see, who wants to go first?
Nigel, you want to go?
Yeah, I can go first. So I'm kind of on the back end of the agricultural space. So to answer your question on the like meat rearing, animal rearing, yes, animals are a part of nature, and currently we have systems of demand and supply that are existing. Like people want bacon right now, and so there's this whole entire system and supply chain and and methodologies and expertise and scientific data and animal feed that create a system to supply that demand. That can definitely be supplied through cellular means. The majority of water that's used is not at the slaughterhouse. That's just the most hardest water to clean up and reintroduce back into the natural environment. The most amount of water is used growing the feed for the cattle, the livestock. So just to answer your question there, and on the back end, what wastewater treatment is essentially doing, everybody, can you guys all hear me?
We can hear your video froze. We can hear you.
Okay. What wastewater treatment is actually doing is making it easy for bacteria and microbes to break down waste in the water. And so that same process of growing microbes is the same process many companies that have gotten a lot of funding around cellular meat have been using. They've been fermenting things, growing bacteria to produce protein. And so this is a whole nother realm of using different wastewater, for instance, from a brewery that's already food grade, to then grow bacon tasting protein. It's super exciting, and cutting out the whole butchery, the whole animal welfare. I think it's a huge space.
Yeah, Julieta, I have a sort of complimentary view. I'd echo everything Nigel just said, but in the area of ag, I think one of the really exciting things we're seeing in terms of a growth area where ag and water and energy come together is in containerized ag. And one of the really interesting things about containerized ag is that a lot of our, like, stick a sprout in the ground and water it and kind of leave it alone, you can actually do a lot better with more careful observation and more thoughtful application of water and nutrients to plants. And so indoor containerized ag is one way to have a much more controlled environment. You can also generate and deploy more sunlight onto the plants, et cetera. And you can also allow ag to take place in neighborhoods and communities that don't have access to good fresh food. And so there's also a really interesting equity opportunity I see in containerized ag, where people could have high productivity, well-maintained systems where, and then the water essentially stays in the box, because you can have the water flow through the soil and it'll pick up salts, and then you can desalinate out the salts and put the water right back on the crop. And the only time the water leaves is in the shape of a zucchini, where it then goes out the door and goes into, into somebody's salad. And so that's a really exciting area. I would say also, kind of echoing what Nigel said, like, I think ag hasn't had to be more water careful because they haven't had to be more water careful. And now you're seeing in California, for example, we have enormous stress in the Central Valley. And frankly, the first thing that's happening is people are getting rid of flood row irrigation. They're putting in emitters, they're putting in a lot of places, just practical water conservation, more thoughtful applications of water. And in some places, they're actually seeing better yields and better profitability for their farms. So again, I always hate it when it seems like environmental segment is somehow in opposition to the ag segment. The two can actually work in much greater harmony, and rather than fighting over what seems like a limited resource like water, and like having rock, paper, scissors over whether California decides to have salmon or almonds. I think that there are ways in which technology can deliver both. And I encourage you to keep looking at those. Water conservation can be very profitable for ag producers.
Thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, but Peter, I love the comment about they're not because they haven't had to.
Yeah.
I think it's a really important comment as we look at any system in large scale that we see today. It's rare that I see a large system that was there because people are evil. it's often there because it comes from a different time with different constraints, and it's done a lot of good with some really big unintended consequences. And I think the really good innovation addresses a better system than the one we have now from the jump off point of where we are now.
When you're going to think about nudging people, especially whose identity and culture and community is fixed in a place, in a time, it's really important to be loving and warm and open to hearing their stories, listening to their stories, but then also subtly understanding how their stories might map onto a new way, rather than kind of eroding their story and telling this, your story sucks, you're a bad person, you know, et cetera. And these are things, again, where, you know, technology innovation is not just the engineers coming along and you know, selling a new widget. It's also telling a better story, and a story that aligns with people's feelings and beliefs.
Ben, you have a question?
Not this time, but you know, thanks thanks for your guys' talk. It's great.
Hey, Ben, where are you today? Where are you located?
I'm in Bloomington, Indiana.
Bloomington, Indiana. Excellent. Catherine has her hand up.
Yeah, it looks like we have a question from Catherine if you want to share.
Hi, yes. My question's for Peter. So I am currently in a water science and systems analysis class, and we touched on desalination just like a little bit, but I'm just a little more like interested in finding out like a little bit more. So I guess one of the downsides that I've heard about it is that it's expensive, but I feel like that's subjective. So I was wondering if you could clarify like a little bit more on like, what does it mean by expensive, and like how much more expensive is it than just like regular like water treatment?
Yeah. Thanks, Catherine. First of all, where are you?
I'm in Boston, Massachusetts.
Very good. Yeah, so actually the question you just raised, Catherine, is exactly at the heart of the research we're doing at Maui. And that is, how do we get desal less quote unquote expensive, or the flip side of that is how do we make the water more valuable? And so, you know, this, you know, you're kind of alluding to a kind of problem we have with water in a lot of the world, especially in the United States, is that strictly speaking, for the value it delivers to us and to our communities, it's vastly underpriced. And because it's underpriced, that means that we can't recoup enough economic you know, returns from water systems, which means we are always like kind of allowing the systems to erode and degrade, et cetera. And then we have a challenge like climate change, which is going to impose fundamental shifts on our water supplies. So the first thing about desalination is you go around today and ask yourself, well, where are we doing desalination? Because if it's expensive, well, we're still doing it in some places, so it must be valuable enough to do. So you go to like San Diego County. So you're familiar maybe with the Carlsbad desalination plant. It's in Carlsbad, California, just north of San Diego. It provides 7% of San Diego County's water. And Catherine, today, the offtake agreement for that plant produces water at $2,200 per acre foot. Now, at the same time, San Diego County has a long-term contract with the Colorado River project, which brings water from Colorado, and they buy that water at $1,100 per acre foot. And so you sit there, Catherine, and say, why would you spend twice as much money for the same water? And the answer is the desalinated water is essentially twice as valuable because it's absolutely impervious to climate change. No matter what happens, we will always have ocean water lapping at the shores of Carlsbad, California. You will always have some water available. Whereas Colorado River project water is going to ebb and flow with drought. And given the trend line we see for climate change, there is a certain time in the future where San Diego County simply may not get enough water. And so San Diego County realized, if I forward calculate the value of resilience into this water system, I'm going to get some desalinated water. It might be more expensive than the current water supply, but it's more valuable because it's climate resilient. Think of it like this. Our water systems need to not be anchored to a single water supply because it's very fragile. We need to have a portfolio. And so think of desalination as like having like a bond in your retirement package. You know, it's kind of expensive. The yield is kind of low, but it's extremely stable. And it provides a certain amount of diversification for water supply. And so I'm not out there saying, every drop of water should be desalinated. But in places where you have the risk of water scarcity, the risk of sudden disruption, the absence of water can be deadly. And that's the time where you want to have resilience in your system. So that's my argument when people talk about desalination being too expensive. The answer is, well, it's a lot less expensive than not having enough water in your city, to have water in your schools, to have water in your senior centers. Those are the times when water gets very valuable. So it's, in a way, it's an investment that the County of San Diego made to have climate resilience in their system. And by the way, the costs are going down. So another data point for you, Catherine, is that desalination in the United States is pretty expensive relative to equivalent freshwater sources. In Saudi Arabia right now, they are doing, they are having tenders for bids on desalination projects that are coming in at under 30 cents per cubic meter. That's a very, very cheap amount of money for desalinated ocean water. And so in the case of Saudi Arabia, one of the other things they're realizing is that seawater contains minerals. It contains lithium, it contains rubidium and bromine and valuable chemicals that normally we're using mining and other extractive technologies to extract these minerals. Why don't we just actually use the brine from the desalination plant and harvest these components directly? We're going from a carbon-based economy where practically everything that I'm sitting on just a carbon everywhere. My cushions are made of carbon. Everything's carbon. There are going to be 4 ingredients in the future: sand, seawater, sunlight, and CO2. Those are going to be the constituents that we need to make the future out of. And desalination becomes then part of a sort of a new factory, making not just water, but other products.
Oh,
Peter.
thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, I love how you reframe this instead of the cost of water to the value, because that's what needs to happen, because water is undervalued and underappreciated and taken for granted, except in the place in the world that they don't have it.
Yeah.
And that's got to be the shift that has to occur. And as much as people don't want the cost of water going up, it's inevitable. It's just a question of when, not if, because it's underpriced today. Andy, I'm just wondering for you, and I know you have some limited time, wondering with you, and particularly looking at the fashion industry and use of water. I saw recently that Wrangler just came out with a 90% or so reduction in one of their jeans. Any insights you might just share about what's happening in the fashion industry relating to water?
You know, I think it's similar to the rest of the conversation. It's of course not, the externality is not priced, water's not priced effectively. And upstream is really hard for people to account for in making fashion choices. So I do believe the industry, which I'd love to be more, I would love the driver to be more customer centric than I believe it even is. But I think the reputational risk of companies and water use is starting to become more, is a factor for companies in thinking about their own footprints and what they're doing. So I have seen tremendous progress over the last 10 years in that. Jeans are obviously one of, we calculate the footprint, water, waste, and CO2 for every item when a customer makes a new versus decision. I'm sorry, new versus used. And different, the implication of those decisions is very different for a pair of jeans, given the water implication compared to CO2 versus something that was made of a different material. Denim is obviously one of the most water hungry products that we use.
Yeah,
I think people are taking more stock of it. I don't sense anything that that gives me anything outside of this conversation that tells me that we are in good shape right now. I think we got a lot of work to do. I wish that sounded more optimistic.
yeah, we all wish we were. That's why we have our emissaries to be leading us to this
Yes.
future. So Matthew, you got something bubbling?
Oh, yeah, I had a question for Andy, or if
Yeah.
oh, Matthew, why don't you?
Go ahead. I know, I don't care. Go ahead. I could ask right after. No worries.
Just a quick question, Andy. Are you seeing
Yeah.
more brands shift to choose more durable natural goods, or is it mostly through the manufacturing process that they're sharing that they've saved, how many trees or how many
It's
gallons of water?
most of the, and I'm drawing this from my Walmart work and then time since then, most of the footprint analysis and reporting that most companies do is upstream reporting. And it typically, sometimes it goes one stage, in other words, the direct footprint, sometimes more. It's often, sometimes like with a pair of jeans, I think this is well known by now, the implication in washing is actually as great, if not greater. And I think in jeans, most apparel greater in the care of an item than the production. But it is very difficult to track that, so we tend to not look at it. So I think that we are getting better ways to track and measure those things. Ultimately, I find that generally with the level that you are doing a detailed life cycle assessment, you're already preaching to the choir. So the changes that we actually need right now happen at a higher level that don't require the decimal points. They're just about better ways to get things and better ways to do things that don't require a choice of, is this going to save 1.5 gallons versus 4 gallons? It's just a choice of not washing your jeans, right? Just kind of basic practices that I think dwarf some of the other details. I don't know if I've got much more to add there, but I mean, I think the system, it's going to be very difficult to address from a fashion standpoint. The problems that we have in fashion, it's going to be difficult to address them by doing things like we do now, just a little bit better. We need more wholesale change. So one of those is clearly getting more use out of what we've made. We need more.
Thanks, Andy. Matt?
Yeah, I had a question for Peter in terms of
Matt, where are you? First of all, where are you?
yeah. Right now I'm in Santa Barbara, but I live in Pacifica, just south of San Francisco. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar, but if you're in the Bay Area.
Oh yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah.
so I was just wondering, because I mean, my knowledge of desalination is fairly limited, but I'm just curious, what are like some of the innovations that are coming into that space that excite you right now? Like what has got your eye, like got your light in the eye or something that you're excited to see what happens?
Yeah. Well, so you're you're in Santa Barbara right now?
Yeah, I go to UC Santa Barbara.
Okay, very good. Well, so you're drinking desalinated water, dude.
Oh yeah, I didn't know
Santa
that.
Barbara has a packaged desal plant. What's interesting is they bought it installed a couple years ago, and then we had a couple lush years in California, so they turned it off, etc. And then they turned it back on, and it's providing a significant fraction of the city's water. But the really interesting place, the kind of innovations that I'm hoping for is that these desalination plants, like the one in Santa Barbara and in Carlsbad, are still custom built. They're built by engineers, and we love engineers, and it's all good, but they're spending all this time, like building these things from scratch. And what we are trying to do it now is try to get some of these desal systems to be a little bit smaller and more compact. So, bye-bye, Andy. Nice to meet you. Take care.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah. So the desal plants tend to be big because they have to be built custom. So I want to make desal much smaller. In fact, I've got this kind of joke that I want to make a water washing machine. So like you have a water washing machine in your apartment. And so the water comes through and it gets washed and cleaned, and not only washed and cleaned, but like Nigel, you could say, you know what? I love the taste of New York City water. So like a barista, we could put back just the minerals associated with the Adirondacks, and you taste that water and so good. Or you're like, no, I like the bracing, British Columbia water, and you kind of turn the dial and have that, and so good. Water, as you know, I mean, Stuart can hear me talk about this. Water is the most amazing. It is so delicious, and it speaks because the mineral characteristics are so it's so much part of the terroir where it comes from that it influences the cuisine. You know, why do you get such amazing pasta in like northern Italy? The Dolomite Mountains and all that magnesium and calcium in the water there. And so I would like to see water as more of a beverage, and our homes designed to be more water efficient with our little water washing machines. And okay, I don't necessarily want to directly drink some of the water that's come through my system. All right, I get that. But maybe I can cascade it. Like the stuff that comes through my shower can then go into another system, I'm really eager to get designers and architects thinking about the water efficient home, because I think we tend to think of like water conservation as these little piddly, like I'll put a restrictor in my shower and I'll sit there with this like, it's like a little cherub like peeing on me. It's like, no, when I want water, I want to enjoy the rush. I just don't want to feel like I'm throwing it away. And so I wish we could design our homes to be water luscious, but water conscious, and so we could have this immense relationship with water, with the sound of water in our interior spaces, the flow of water in our gardens, and at the same time not feel like we're just throwing it all away. So those are the places where I would that I'm hoping we can innovate and make water efficient. I think we could make houses, honestly, that would feel as luscious as today's houses, and we could be using less than half the water. And it's just a design challenge. It's not even a technology challenge.
You've coined a completely new term, water luscious, Peter. Love it.
I hate those shower heads.
The little pilly, the little pee shower heads. It's awful, Nigel. Sucks.
Yeah.
It's like wearing a hair shirt. Nobody needs that.
One thing that I want to add onto what you said, Peter, is Matthew, we have a lot of the technologies out there, but that application, that how it fits in, how it's bought, how it's installed, what people's concepts around, oh, it's a hassle to have a water machine in my own house. I'll just,
throw it down the drain. Yeah.
throw it down the drain, or like put it in a bucket and dump it on. So the aspect of making something cool, or like social signaling, or there's a bunch of different like social aspects, a bunch of different interesting things. One of the most interesting things I've heard was all the lithium that's needed for car batteries. The question of, like Peter said before, can we extract those minerals that are present in just regular seawater? Or can we use that brine and that high salt environment to grow something else? And yeah, those aspects. And the third thing I want to say is that when they build something like a desal plant or wastewater treatment plant and water treatment plant for the first time, that plant in itself and that technology is only a small sliver of the actual costs of the whole system. And the whole system includes pump stations, drilling underneath houses to directional drilling to deliver that whole sewerage, water pressurized system. That is actually most of the money and most of the time. So to build on that.
Yeah, and so that's the thing, Nigel. Like if we could have more modularized water, you wouldn't have to have all that big buried infrastructure. So like in California, we've got this terrible, terrible problem. We can't build houses, and I want to have a sustainable architecture as much as the next person, but part of the challenge is there's lots of land in California. We just have no water for the land. Well, what if communities actually weren't just water sustainable? What if they actually took polluted groundwater or salty brackish groundwater and naturally and purified it, used the fresh water, took the salts and pollutants away, and then restored back to the ground better water quality than came out of the ground? Like imagine communities like oysters where they serve a role actually to purify the water as people go about their day, and then the solids and the salts get safely compacted into solid bricks and then get transported away. We're doing a lot of research right now in this area of water treatment called zero liquid discharge, ZLD. And that's a process of taking these salty waters and squeezing every last drop of water and leaving behind a solid chunk. And you get this salt, and you get all these other minerals that Nigel represented and described. And really solid salt's very safe to handle and safe to dispose. In fact, that's how nature disposes of her salt. She buries it in big playas and covers it with mud. And that's how we safely store salt.
How about Emma? Do you have a question for Nigel or Peter?
Yeah, it's kind of for you both, actually. I was reading an article.
Where are you from, Emma? Where are you?
Oh, sorry. Denver. I'm in Denver right now.
You're in Denver. Very good.
But I was reading an article about atmospheric water generators.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you knew more about that, and if you thought that was something that might be, a competition for desalination plants, or something that would be like in the future of water somehow.
And Nigel, what do you want to go first? Do you want to talk about those things?
Peter, you can correct me. All I know from my experience is that they only work effectively when there is a substantial amount of humidity in the air. But if that's tied to cheap electricity, say from solar, it works. It works for many places that can no longer drill, or the water's too drill for water, or the water's too polluted. But that's all I know, Peter.
Yeah. So yeah, everything Nigel said, absolutely true. Atmospheric water generations are basically dehumidifiers. They're pulling the humidity out of the air and they're condensing it back into the liquid. And there's been a lot of excitement about atmospheric water generators, and the idea that you could have like solar panels on your roof and water panels on your roof, and the solar panels would drip out electrons and the water panels would drip out water. There are some challenges technically, Emma. One of the things is that there's not a lot of water in a box of air. Even a moist box of air does not have a lot of molecules of water. So you need to move a lot of air through these things in order to get the water out. And so sometimes you need air handling, you need some favorable ways to transport the air across these systems to get the water out. The other thing, Emma, is that actually we've had atmospheric water generators for a long time. They're called dehumidifiers. And depending on where you live in the United States, dehumidification in the interior of buildings is really important. For one thing, if you don't dehumidify in some tropical climates, Nigel, like Singapore, you can get mold and you can get unhealthy interior conditions. In fact, a lot of people are concerned that like unhealthy buildings, sick building syndrome may actually be due to mold and mildew that's forming in interior surfaces. And so dehumidification has two real big benefits. One is you have better interior conditions. Two, you actually lower the corrosion rate of all the materials inside the building. And actually there's a third benefit, is that people in a dry building enjoy warmer temperatures. So you don't have to air condition the buildings as much. So in Singapore, for example, Nigel, you could have a building at a relative humidity of 40%, which would be dry. And that thermostat can be set at 76 degrees Fahrenheit. And people would be very comfortable. Whereas in a wet or a clammy building, you're always having to turn on the AC and use all that electricity. And frankly, it ends up feeling kind of nasty because it's all cold and clammy. So Emma, that's my kind of spin on atmospheric water generators. You want to use them not just where you don't have an available water supply, but also maybe where you want to get the water out of the air. And they can be very efficient for that.
Yeah, I'll add for that, as Peter said, there have been atmospheric water technologies around for decades. And Daniel, is it Kamen, the founder of Oh, boy. Of those, the vehicles that you, huh?
Segway
Yeah, Segway.
scooters.
He created a product called the Slingshot, if you guys are familiar with that he spent a lot of money, of his own money, probably tens of $1 millions in developing this, focused on developing it for the third world in particular, where it was less financially viable to put in infrastructure. And it was quite expensive, and he shelved it, but I wouldn't be surprised he'll come back with it at some point. We've looked at many technologies for atmospheric water, and they're getting more advanced. There's some brilliant young entrepreneurs creating new ideas, and we think that the technology is definitely going to come and become economically viable. And the question is, how much of the moisture can you pull out of the air? And it really is region specific. So there's certain areas which have high levels of humidity, and you have a greater ability to pull the water out of the air there. So it's closer to the equator. It's going to be more economical and more likely to be able to do that, which is probably good for the developing world. And I mean, the real question for people that need the water, it doesn't matter what the quality of the water is, right? They just want the water and they just need to drink it. But people ask me all the time, well, shouldn't I just be collecting rain and drinking my rainwater? And I said, no, you got to know what's in your rainwater. You got to think about that.
Not without disinfecting it, please, because bird poop is terrible for you.
Yeah. And what else is in it from whatever toxins that are in the air, and pollutants, et cetera. So, as Peter said earlier, water is the most magical compound that exists, that we still know about that much about water. And we're learning every day new more ideas and technologies, and atmospheric water will be one of those that I think they will be part of our future, like desal. It'll be really a key factor.
Yeah.
So we haven't heard from you yet, Emily. That's rare.
Yeah, I'm here though. Sorry, I think I'm coming down with something. But yeah, this is a really cool talk. I also don't know a lot about water infrastructure, so I'm always happy to learn more. Oh, right. I'm currently in New Jersey in my hometown, but I go to school in Michigan. So I guess I was kind of close to interesting water events, as you can say. Actually, for my major orientation, I study public health. We were supposed to go to a wastewater treatment site, and I was really excited. But then I got lost, so I missed the bus, so I didn't go. So my question is, so I see really cool wash projects being done on community levels. And I just wanted to know, in terms of viability, would it be economically or even social, politically, culturally feasible to scale up some community projects and bring those concepts to a state, federal, or if we're projecting international level? And have you seen any examples of that in real life?
Can I volunteer one? So Emily, in San Francisco, the San Francisco County passed an ordinance that new multi-unit, I forget it's maybe 40-unit construction, et cetera, had to have premise scale water reclamation, and it was supposed to be used to then go to irrigate. And it was a bit of a, I mean, it was sort of a sneaker regulation, and the real estate community didn't like it because well, there's none of these technologies. What am I going to do? I need to build my building, and you're telling me I need something, and I don't know what it is. But what's happening now is that there are some entrepreneurs and some startups that are working with developers to develop these really cool and frankly relatively low cost water reclamation systems. And the city of San Francisco is seeing two benefits. For starters, you don't have the additional water demand because some of this water is going out for irrigation. And two, because you're capturing this wastewater and not putting it back in the system, you're also not burdening the sewage system. And so in some cases, there's this one startup called Epic Cleantech, and they essentially will take all the wastewater and they will dry out the solids. They will carbonize them with a chemical process, and it becomes a soil amendment, actually a beautiful soil amendment. And so you basically are allowing the buildings to kind of become semi-autonomous, at least with their wastewater. And so ironically, Emily, the places, regulations sometimes have to kind of nudge us forward. And so that's my recommendation to all of you. You know, you can be an entrepreneur and invent technology. You can also be just a concerned citizen and demand that regulations get improved, and that will nudge the industry forward to have to adopt stuff, including water reclamation.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Great points, Peter.
Yeah, I would like to add that I think citywide or countywide in Vermont, they have a small group that collects the urine.
Yeah, Rich Earth Institute. You know those guys?
Yeah,
love those guys. Pea cycling. Yeah.
So they take your urine, they ferment it, and fermenting it, decreases the amount of
any of the pathogenic bacteria. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they dilute it to 10% urine and water, and they use it as a soil as fertilizer.
Fertilizer. Yeah.
And that's in the U.S. And then there's another one that deals with human manure, which is, I think it also started in Vermont. But
yeah. What is it about Vermont, man?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's scatological. Love it.
But they lobby on a statewide level to allow for composting toilets. So they've got, I think their group or their alliance have gotten a lot of, because when we flush the toilet, only a little bit, well, depending on your turd size, is
that's right.
A little bit of it's the actual
poop. Most of it's just free. It's drinking water. Nigel, we use drinking water. I mean, can you, like, that's almost sounds sacrilegious. That's like using pages of the Gutenberg Bible to, like, clean your desk. It's just like, we shouldn't be using drinking water, the sanctity of drinking water for that.
I know. It drives me crazy, Peter.
Yeah.
And yeah, so what's stopping people from having a own, as long as they have one flushable toilet in these certain states? I think it's like Washington, Oregon, Vermont. There's a couple other, maybe in Michigan even. As long as they have one flush toilet, they're allowed to have an outhouse or a composting toilet that's NSF certified.
Yeah.
So yeah, on the policy level, there are groups pressuring that. And then the third one's like one of the most interesting economic models for wastewater that I've seen, which is I forgot where they're located, but they are in East Africa, and they've created a model of collecting human waste, poop, and making it into fuel and fertilizer briquettes. And there's a whole like collection system. It's a village wide, and then they've combined a bunch of villages to collect all these human waste solids. And I think it employs like 40 or 50 people now. And so, yeah, that is a solution for developing Africa, is tried and tested.
Great innovations, Nigel. Thank you.
All right, well, it looks like we've hit time. If anybody has any other questions, we'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, we can close it up for tonight, and then we'll see you on Thursday. And we have a really cool program planned for Thursday. Drew from Just Water is going to be leading in sort of guest judging an activity that we're going to be doing. So we would love to see all of you there for that. Nigel and Peter, thank you so much for coming today and sharing your stories.
You all. And thank you
all
all
for so great hearing from you.
Thank you all for being part of this program, and always reach out to us if you have any other questions or stuff happens in the future. Good to see you all.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom that you've shared with us.
You bet. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a good night.
See you on Thursday.
Thank you. Good night.